Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Today, I am talking about Latin participles. Now, participles in Latin are very important because Latin absolutely loves their participles. Now, in English, remember we talked about last time, English uses participles mostly as helping verbs and verbal adjectives. So like the running man, the man who is running. You can kind of flip it into a relative clause. For us, Latin participles, more often than not, can stand on their own, really. I mean, remember, they're not conjugated verbs. They still act as adjectives, but they can do verbal things. They can take objects. Um, so for us today, we're going to recognize the different Latin participles, look at different ways we can translate them, and then we're going to practice creating participles from Latin verbs. So there are 4 Latin participles you need to know. You've already encountered the perfect passive. This is our 4th principal part. Now remember, I've been harping on memorizing all of our principal parts as we go, even though you haven't come across them yet. Or even though you haven't had to translate them yet, it just makes it a lot easier. So now if you've got, for example, laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatum, you've got that 4th principal part already memorized. You've got the perfect passive participle. So in our example there of laudatum, having been praised. We have the present active, laudans, laudantis, praising. The future active, laudaturus, he who is about to praise, and the future passive, about to be praised, laudantus. So the 4th principal part, this is the easiest one to create. You take your 4th principal part, you turn it into a first, second adjective. Remember, it borrows from first and second conjugation to modify either a masculine or a feminine or a neuter noun. So laudatus, laudata, laudatum, having been praised. The present active participle, you take the 2nd principal part, which is laudare. Remember, that is our present active infinitive. And you take off that infinitive ending, which is that re, which leaves you lauda. That lauda, then you stick on ins intis. You turn it into a 3rd declension adjective. And this is, it's a one termination, one termination, 3rd declension adjective. And it's, like our example earlier of the running man, the praising man, laudans weir. It's easy to recognize the present active participle because it's the only participle that's 3rd declension. The rest are all first, second. So we've got 2 so far. Everyone good? Any questions? Just go ahead and raise your hand if you have any questions. Doing all right so far. So if I asked you guys to start forming these, you'd be able to do it. The future active participle is a little, sometimes can be confusing because it's active in voice. However, you have to go to that 4th principal part. You have to take that participial stem, laudat, because remember laudatus, laudata, laudatum, those are already our perfect passive. So we have to make it future active. And I like this because we have the future active participle has the future in it, T-U-R. Kind of sometimes helpful there. So you take your participial stem from the 4th principal part, laudat, add U-R, U-S, U-R-A, or U-R-U-M. Laudaturus, laudatura, laudaturum, about to praise. And that's the future active participle. So there we go. Sorry. Someone's messing up here. All right. The future passive participle. Now, the future passive participle is also called the gerund. And you will need to know what the gerund is as we move on. So it's a good idea to remember the future passive participle is my gerund, but I'm not going to ask you that right away. It's just something to know for right about now. So the future passive participle, you go to the 2nd principal part, which is also our present active infinitive. You remove that infinitive ending, that re, and then you add our endings, ndus, ndi, ndium. Laudandus, laudanda, laudandum, about to be praised. The way I remember this one is that my future passive participle, it's in the future because the future hasn't ended yet. Ended. It's a pun. Woo-hoo. Oh, you guys, thanks for the chuckles. I appreciate it. So, good little summary here. The present active comes from the second principal part. Perfect passive comes from the fourth principal part. The future active comes from the fourth principal part. And the future passive comes from the second principal part. So I'm not taking anything from the first principal part, not taking anything from the third. For participles in Latin, I am solely forming them based on the second principal part or the fourth principal part. Another kind of helpful chart here. So the future active, I have my participial stem plus my endings. Future passive, I have my present stem, which comes from the second principal part, plus my endings. Present stem for the present active participle. And that then I tack on my third declension, one termination adjectival endings. And the perfect passive is just the fourth principal part, turn it into a first, second adjective. So hopefully this helps as a kind of like an introduction to my first, as an introduction to our participles. Now we're going to go over this a lot more in detail later, but hopefully here we can kind of, have a good jumping off point for us. Are there any questions? All right, thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your day.